call this District of Tofino regular council meeting for April 28th, 2015 to order at 10:14 a.m. And I will start by making a motion to amend the agenda to remove item 11.6, which is the arts and culture grant applications, because we've already done them. Is there a seconder for that?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bart. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. So then, if I may have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Seconded by Councillor Thick. All in favor? Thank you very much. Motion carried. No business arising from the minutes. Announcements from the mayor. It's my pleasure today to recognize one of the District of Tofino's employees, Chris Lyons, here in the audience, and to thank you for your 10 years of service to the District of Tofino. We have a plaque for you, so please come on up. There you go. Thank you very much for your work. Photo opportunity. Sorry, everybody. Chris, we're going to make you have a picture taken for the paper. So you turn around. Okay, there, council in the background. How's that? Yeah.
I think everyone wanted to be Sasha for
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, take care. Thanks.
Okay, and then we'll move into our delegations. Yes.
We need to adopt the minutes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I skipped that. We'll go backwards. I was too excited to give the 10-year service award. Councillor McMaster moves adoption of the minutes April 14th, seconded by Councillor Bart. All in favor? Thank you very much. Motion carried. Sorry about that. Now we have our delegations, and I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Paul Hasselback, who most of council has seen before, but Councillor Blanchette, this will be his first time hearing your presentation, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council, and congratulations on your upcoming 4-year term. I will put out a few challenges to you. As you are aware, I try to come around and meet with councils about once a year, just to talk a little bit about what we know about information and developing information, and try to be as upbeat as possible, but still share some reality, and that taste of realities I know bites a little bit, but there's always good news in the midst of that. For those of you who remember, we collect health information at the Alberni-Tla-o-qui-aht Regional District boundaries, also known as Local Health Area 70 or Alberni. And those reports are online. They're updated every year. We try to incorporate into those reports a variety of information about health status in particular, but there's a variety of other indicators that actually contribute to our understanding of well-being within communities, which I'll touch on as well. Alberni is one of the few areas that is blessed by having coterminous geographic boundaries, political boundaries, and school district boundaries. And so the school district is actually also broken up, though, into school neighborhoods. And of note is that there is a geographic area known as the West Coast as a school neighborhood. And because of that, we actually have information that brings down to the West Coast level. And I know the District of Tofino is being really interested in getting more community-specific information. Please remember to ask me about where that request is. It's not my request, but I actually know where the answer is. For those of you who are aware, we track life expectancy as one of the single indicators of health status, and it's been shown for many years, about 25 years at least, that life expectancy in the whole of the Alberni Valley is substantively less than that of the rest of the island, the rest of BC. Just showing it in a slightly different way. If we look at Alberni in here, the taller line is the life expectancy of women, who enjoy about 4 years advantage over men in most areas. That is compared to the solid lines up at the top. So we're still several years shorter life expectancy for both males and for females in the shorter line compared to the dotted line for males. The good news is that life expectancy continues to improve, and I'm not going to show that to you again, but the most recent information also suggests that it continues to improve in the Alberni Valley. Another single measure out there that I encourage you to watch that I have not shared with Council in the past is a socioeconomic index which is developed by BC Statistics that incorporates together a variety of different indicators of education, economics, social status, justice measures as well. And compared to the province at 0, data that I show to the right tends to mean that that's better than the average, and to the left, poorer than average. The numbers here range from about 1 to -1. Why -1 is good, I'm not quite sure, but that is actually how this index works. I've only shown the indices for the island specifically. There are a variety of other local health areas in the BC which actually have indices that are significantly worse than Alberni. But Alberni is challenged when it comes to trying to bring that average up at least to where the island average might be. So during the next 4 years, I'd like to throw out a few challenges to Council. Happy to talk about them, but at least to put them forward. One is to continue to support the work of the Health Network. Its engine is revving, it's starting to move forward. I think there's some real progress occurring, and at least it's something where there's a common currency and a common opportunity for those discussions. I know that Council has worked really hard on addressing drinking water issues and continue to encourage you to do so. A couple of specific deliverables that I think Council needs to be checking in on. One is the emergency planning. Second, I'd encourage you to begin looking at a housing strategy. And that's a West Coast issue, but one that this Council may be interested in. And certainly the ongoing work that's actually occurring in not just the completion, but also now the implementation for the transportation strategy for the Alberni area. Our data is collected from a whole variety of items. I thought I'd actually share with you some of the specific sources, so if anyone's interested in delving down even deeper, you can actually go into some of these sites and find, in some cases, Tofino district specific information under the National Household Survey. Sometimes it's at a broader area such as the West Coast with a human early learning partnership and the school information. And certainly there are other measures out there as well that you might be interested in delving into. One that you should be aware of is the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust Vital Signs Report. They do a phenomenal job, okay, and it is a real pleasure to work with this group and a resource that I'm not sure that you appreciate sufficiently. I know you do, okay, but I work with a variety of other local governments, and they aren't blessed with such keen and interested individuals in the sharing of information that so openly occurs on the West Coast. Just as an example, I picked up one page here, which really does sort of start reflecting some of the issues on housing. I'm trusting that you've had an opportunity to see the report, but the challenge really does come down to the appropriate diversity of housing options available on the West Coast and whether those are being met. And I think if you go into the report, you'll find some really interesting approaches to determining how insecure certain components of the population on the West Coast are when it comes to actual housing, and the need for having a longer-term strategy for incorporation. I have heard that there are rumors that people are actually working on that. Council should be interested in being actively involved in that process. There is good news out there, so I thought I'd share some good news. One of which seems to be a surprise to most people. When we go to schools, there's a survey that's undertaken every 5 years. So every high school student basically gets to do this survey once while they're in school. It's called the McCreary Adolescent Survey, and it's been undertaken for about 25 years now as well, every 5 years. And if we're looking at evidence of abuse or overuse or sometimes even use of substances, what we have seen is that for alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, a very consistent pattern, that both at the BC level and at the Central Island level, of decreases in substance use. So while there's ongoing concerns, I think that there's also room for a little bit of celebration that the work that is occurring in schools is being effective. I wanted to flag a couple of things about changing social structures and family structures. The release of the National Household Survey and the census last year provides geographic information at a much more specific level. You can actually get some information down to the District of Tofino. Sometimes it's on the West Coast. The help folks at UBC pulled this off for the school neighborhoods, which includes West Coast. And certainly some of the information, and I'll be sharing some of that at the community coming together next forum next week, relative to changing family structures that are occurring on the West Coast. And we can take a look at that over multiple censi as well. So I'm not sharing all the information with you right now. I'm not trying to take away some thunder, just so that you're aware of the extent of the information that you do have, not necessarily at your fingertips, but if you go digging, you can find it. Certainly, a higher proportion of lone parent-led families on the West Coast, and these are families with children, and something that you might want to delve into a little bit further as well. Another good news story, if we're looking specifically at School District 70 and the success rates of high school completion. This is measured by the number of students finishing anywhere who started grade 8, if I remember correctly, okay, and complete their grade 12 within 6 years of starting anywhere in BC, but they'd be coded back to the School District 70 when they started in grade 8. Back in 2009, this was a real concern in the province of BC. BC has seen an increase of about 5% over that period of time. We're still not graduating about 15% of high school students. That should be a concern for all. If we were looking at Alberni, that was only about 2/3 of high school students who are actually completing high school. That's increased up to 3/4. That's a really significant improvement, just to show Nanaimo hasn't been as successful. I've been shaming them considerably, but I think you should be celebrating some of the work the School District 70 has undertaken. Again, we can take a look, and this is more not to focus in on the fact that there are some economic challenges, but that comparing data over 4 years period of time is available and included in some of the reports that I bring forward. Really, economic status remains fairly constant for the Alberni area. It would be nice if I could come in here with a large contribution, but unfortunately I don't have that for you. The other thing that plays out when we look at economic status is we have a high proportion of children that are living in impoverished conditions. The highest on the island, that's about over 1 in 3 of our children under the age of 6. And something I think we all need to be focusing our attention on. And you are hearing more and more about development of poverty strategies or strategies to address poverty. If we break this down for just the West Coast is doing relatively well compared to other parts of the Alberni area. However, we're still looking at 1 in 5 children on the West Coast who's living in impoverished conditions. So just something that even when we drill that down, it's no longer possible to say it must be somewhere else. Okay, this is a real life problem locally. West Coast compared to both BC and Canada, higher. Interestingly, we can also look at higher income families and the unusual distribution that exists across the Alberni Valley, that there are not a high proportion of high income families actually living in the West Coast area. And as I approach sort of my conclusion here, I've shared with you the early development instrument. This is the measure of how prepared our children are when they get to kindergarten. So the culmination of all those 0 to 6 activities. Often that's associated with economic status. So Alberni's economic status was over here on the right-hand side, which was doing fairly poorly. And here we are looking at their EDI scores, which are relatively speaking much better than economic status. Again, a real point for celebration about something that is occurring right in the Alberni Valley with a focus on children. So good news stories there. The other thing is that the Alberni Valley was one of the few areas where we actually saw either an improvement, because numbers higher are poorer. In the case of the Alberni Valley, it stayed the same between 2009, 2011, and 12 and 13, which is a real success because just about everywhere across the province, as well as across the island, we saw increases between those two time frames. The only places that we're seeing improvements are where economic conditions seem to be thriving. In this case, Saanich, Gulf Islands, and Greater Victoria. And with that, Your Worship, members of council, and your administration, who I failed to acknowledge, as well as your honored guests here, many of who left on me. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this presentation that you make every year, because I know that although the municipality doesn't have a direct interface as much with Island Health as, say, the Alberni-Clackett Regional District might, or the Health Network does, that all of the decisions we make at the council table impact the well-being of our community and its residents. And to see the quantitative data that you can present and show us the reality of our situation, as well as what's going well and what's not going so well, I think it's a really important reminder, and I especially appreciate the words that you had about the Clackett Visitor Trust and how lucky we are to have them in the Vital Signs report. So thank you again. I always enjoy your presentations. Council, questions? Councillor Thick.
Thank you. It's very good, and I just had a couple of questions. Number one is with regard to the 6-year completion rates. The graph shows it going up for school district 70 and proportionate to BC, but that's including Port Alberni High School. That's Port Alberni, and you call it secondary. And what other high schools are there?
I'm trying to remember how many high schools there are in Port Alberni.
Just one.
Just
the
one?
one, because,
okay.
So is that the two lumped together?
It definitely would be for the whole of the school district 70. And
right.
I can't actually speak that there aren't any other high schools for school district 70.
Would that include the First Nations, like the Noctis High School in Ahousaht?
It's a really good question. Where independent school information has been collected severally, sometimes I can tell you, such as for the EDI, it is not included. I'm not sure for the high school completion rates whether that includes the independent schools. First Nation schools are classified as independent schools.
Right.
Right. So is it possible to break, I mean, since if we're talking generally, we don't know for sure whether this includes Ahousaht or not, but would it not be possible to break that down into two? Because I thought from the Vital Signs report that there was a difference between our local and school district 70 Port Alberni, but I just wondered is it possible to break this, if there is only two? I think there would be a difference between them. I'm not sure if it's significant or not, but I'm just wondering.
Thank you, Worship. And again, I'd have to go back to the Ministry of Education. This raises your questions on collection of data separately, but let's come back to. Ministry of Education actually provides this information because, as I say, it is related to the registration of the student at the start of grade 8. Each individual school may not be aware of people who have moved about whether they completed school or not. Whereas the Ministry of Education will be able to provide that for at least graduates within British Columbia. So whether they could sever the two high schools specifically, or whether they have actually done that, that'd be a fair question to ask the school district. And I know I come around and meet with you, but there's no reason why you shouldn't actually ask the superintendent to come and meet with you.
I will do that.
Because, I mean, it's almost like chalk and cheese. You've got a $56 million high school in Port Alberni approximately that, you know, other high schools have closed and they've been brought in there. And we're comparing that and that facility and that, the range of which they draw with a high school that's existed since 1970 that's barely had a coat of paint on it. So I just find that it looks really good, but I'm not sure I believe it. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bart.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation again. One of the things that we've been involved in as council in various ways, it has to do with reconciliation and things that kind of have played out from that. And so I'm kind of brought to wonder about how, in terms of these measurements, there's been some understanding about where the priorities or the cultural kind of norms are emerging within First Nation communities and how they speak to these measurements. One example, which is, one could say, would speak very forcefully to why you know, high school graduation rates or single family parents or low income childhood, you know, is brought to me by a conversation I had with somebody who works in the health field, who felt that it was appropriate to encourage girls as young as 13 to start having children. And, you know, we had a conversation about that, like, but it put in a cultural context, it was pretty firmly expressed that that would be appropriate. And I don't know, you know, where those conversations are happening around the health table.
Thanks, and through your worship, it's an excellent question. I think one of the advantages of looking like at something like this is that it doesn't address the perceived differences between ethnic groups. Okay. Yes, we can sit here and say that we know for the Alberni area about 17% of the population is First Nations. Okay, on the West Coast that's actually up to about 1/3. So that there are differences in terms of the distribution of First Nations people within the Alberni area. And as a result of that, there's actually some phenomenal best practices that have been established here and are actually being shared out. So I think you should celebrate that as much as recognize it as an identification of cultures coming together. But your comparison groups here don't have those same proportions of Aboriginal populations. So where School District 70 has been successful, they're being successful irrespective of the, let's say, distribution of First Nations within the community. First Nations Health Authority came on board in 2012. It has taken some time for that group to gel in terms of the direction that they're moving. They are now at that point that I think we're starting to see on-the-ground changes occurring. There are a couple of liaison workers working with New Chalmers specifically. They've been on board for a few months now. That's how new this is. There's a counterpart for myself who works with the First Nations Health Authority. I don't think it's been announced, but she is coming to the island. She will be working with us specifically on much of this. First Nations Health Authority has been undertaking fairly significant work on the same sorts of measures of well-being, but haven't shared that beyond themselves at this point in time. Whether they will or not will be their choice, not our choice. And I think that's part of the respect that's developed as well. So I do think there's some really exciting things that are occurring, both at a provincial basis, okay, but celebrate the successes that are also occurring on a local basis, because they really are best practices.
I think that's a very perceptive question, Councillor Bart, because it points to the fact that the indicators we use don't always speak to the values that we have. And Dr. Hasselback recently gave a fantastic presentation to the Alberni Clackwood Health Network that caused us, it was provocative and caused us to think much more about the values we use when we look at indicators. And so teenage pregnancy rate is a good example of something that some people may view high rates of teenage pregnancy as bad, and others may view it as good, depending on your individual values as well as cultural values. And it's a much larger conversation than we're going to have today, but I wondered if you wanted to comment on that at all, Dr. Hasselback.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I'll be giving an iteration of that to the Coming Together Forum. The issue specifically, and I actually didn't address the question, but the issue specifically of the average age of mothering in First Nations at this point in time is significantly less than that of non-First Nations in BC. Whether that's appropriate or not appropriate is something that I need to look to the First Nations Health Authority to define. And if in the process that they are reviewing this information and are aware of the differences, because I've actually seen some of the work that they've done, if they identify that as something of concern, then that's something we can all collectively work with. Or if it's something that in terms of a cultural norm that they want to reinforce, then that's something we should be working with them on as well. So I think we're still waiting on that. But yes, the average age of first mothering, okay, all mothering too, but first mothering in particular, for First Nations is less than that of non-First Nations.
Any other questions? Councillor Thick.
Just that the definition of impoverished, you had said in an earlier slide about that, and I just, can you just explain that, please?
So I use the word impoverished oftentimes to incorporate in both economic, I went the wrong direction, both economic and sometimes I know some families that have lots of income and their kids are living in impoverished conditions because they're not getting that family stimulation and a few other things. But in this case, we're actually looking at poverty or economic measure of impoverishment. This economic measure is defined by Statistics Canada. It has changed as a result of how they're doing the census now, but it's still a standardized approach, and we can make a comparison here between various different jurisdictions and comparisons with other parts of Canada as well, relative to the LIM or low income median measure, okay, and they actually define how that cut point is for specific geographic areas based on the overall family incomes in that area.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Blanchett.
You mentioned on one of your slides under public health items for council to consider the development of a housing strategy, and we are moving in that direction for a long time. I think we're getting very serious about it this term, but I'm just wondering what sort of public health measures or considerations you're basing that on. A lot of what drives our public health or our housing strategy here is like worker requirements. We're not looking at the public health aspect of it.
Thanks, Your Worship. And housing and health are so integrally related. Some people have often said that if you actually want to address health problems, solve the housing problems first. Okay, they're that closely related. We don't necessarily identify for the West Coast, homelessness as a particular issue at this point. But precarious housing, which is a different term, which is really how many individuals do you have in your community that question whether they will actually still be in the same place within a month or within 3 months' time, okay, is significantly higher than we see in some other locations. And some of that has to do with the transient hospitality support industry and populations you're serving. There's no question about that. But that precariousness of the housing has been clearly associated with poor health outcomes. Okay? Likewise, I think the flip side is when we're looking at mental health issues and substance use issues, one of the most important therapeutic interventions that we can provide for both those individuals suffering from chronic mental illness as well as those from substance is stable housing. And once we can bring people into a stable housing situation, it becomes manifestly easier to manage the conditions that they suffer from. Okay, and that's the benefit of the whole community. I've seen enough positive stories of individuals who have suffered from either mental illness or substance use for a long time that have brought through a longer term therapeutic approach through housing become significant contributors to the communities in which they live.
I'm wondering if we're currently doing a housing assessment, a needs assessment, and I'm wondering if you've identified any areas where housing's needed more than others for our area.
Thanks, Your Worship. Personally, I have not. I know that some of the people that are involved have some thoughts. Okay, and they're probably contributed those thoughts. I just want to be sure Council is actively aware that when we look at some of this information, housing keeps percolating to the surface as an issue that collectively the community should be considering to address.
But no particular group identified from what you're...
I've not looked at it carefully enough to establish an answer for you at this point.
Thank you. Anyone else? Final questions? Thank you very much, Dr. Hasselback.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I know Council provided a request through to the Ministry in terms of division of information. I'm going to say I can fully appreciate, I'm not part of government, but I have been tracking this because I've been very supportive of your request here. That has been one of several requests that the Ministry of Health has identified and received relative to trying to not necessarily redefine boundaries, but provide information at a more appropriate local level. They have been working their way through that process. I may start seeing some information within the next month. We're that close. So you may have to put up with me at less than a year's time, but I actually don't know what we're going to be looking at and what sort of information is going to be available. But I did want to share with you that what might not seem like a lot of effort on your part has initiated a cascade of events which are going to be very positive for the whole of BC. So thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to know the letter that the Mayor and I sent in. We actually got a very quick response from the Minister, I have to say. I was surprised, and thank you for your help on that. Enjoy your day and good luck at Ucluelet tonight. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving into correspondence requiring action, and we have a letter from Tla-o-qui-aht First Nations requesting a letter of support from the District of Tofino for their Winchie Creek Micro Hydro project. Councillor Anderson.
Move that we provide a letter of support.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. So moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? Councillor Thick.
It wasn't a map, and I wasn't sure exactly where Winchie Creek was. Does anybody know?
I searched for it too.
You found it.
Yeah.
I can't, Councillor Thick, I can't recall. I actually can, I know exactly the corner on the highway, but I can't describe it to say
Just
that
approximately.
it's this way east of, or west, sorry, of Sutton Pass.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
relatively near one of the other.
Okay. I just wasn't even sure which hemisphere we were.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Doesn't say. Thank you. I support it.
Thank you. Councillor Blanchette.
Yes, I reached out to the Clayoquot Sound Conservation Alliance on this one because I know they've been tracking run-of-river power projects in Clayoquot Sound. And they say they have decided not to oppose, the Conservation Alliance is composed of 6 partners, the Friends of Clayoquot Sound and 5 other big environmental groups like Greenpeace and Sierra Club Wilderness Committee. They say they've decided not to oppose Winchie Creek because the level of industrial development is relatively low and it mostly uses existing corridors. And it's also quite close to an existing grid of power lines, and the Tla-o-qui-aht aim to be 100% owners of it. That said, there are other run-of-river projects in the works that are much less benign, and they would ask that any letter from council stipulate that this would not represent blanket proposal support, blanket support for run-of-river projects in Clayoquot Sound. There are, by my estimate, 8 proposed or existing Clayoquot Sound run-of-river projects in Clayoquot Sound, totaling about 50 megawatts. And some of them are in quite remote locations, which would require a long string of access roads and also of transmission line corridors. And that really can have an impact on what would otherwise be pristine wilderness. So I just want council to be aware of that. There are few of those concerns for this Winchie Creek project, but there's really no cumulative assessment of the effect of multiple. Each of these projects has a relatively small footprint, but once you get 8 or more in, then could very well challenge the golden egg that we call Clackwood Sound in terms of pristine wilderness, unaccessed wilderness.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing those points forward. I'll just verify that the letter of support will be for the Winchie Creek microhydro project as in their letter, so it's not a blanket endorsement. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, so moving into the report section of our agenda, the first is the food primary liquor license amendment application for Wolf in the Fog. And I think we have a presentation from Jane, do we not? Yes, okay, thank you. So this will help us to understand exactly what is being asked of us and how it works with the Liquor Control Licensing Branch when amendment applications are made. And thank you for taking the time to make the presentation. I think this will be very helpful.
So it's kind of nice that we've got the 2 reports together. So the first one is the first stage, and then the second report for Jamie's Rainforest Inn is the second phase once council has approved staff gathering the comments of people in the area and undertaking some referrals. So in terms of this first report, which is from Wolf in the Fog, so the purpose of the report is just twofold. One is just to let council know that District of Tofino has received a amendment application for a primary liquor license to be amended. And then the second thing is just to get direction from council on what council pleasure would be. Would you like to make a recommendation to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch on whether or not this application should be approved? And if you want to do that, then staff would undertake the attendant public consultation process. Or would you like to exercise your statutory right under the legislation to opt out of providing comment? And I'll tell you in a bit how you do that and what that means in terms of public consultation on this particular application. So what I'm going to do in this presentation, I'm kind of weaving the 2 reports together at the same time. So what I'm saying here is also applicable to the second report on Jamie's Rainforest Inn. So I'm going to start by just talking about liquor licensing in BC in general, and then I'm going to focus in on the role of local government. So that involves what is the role of local government in the licensing process, what are the rules, and some of them are statutory, and some are set by best practice and also by guidelines set by the province for gathering the views of nearby residents and businesses and then examining those. And then again, once again, how you can opt out of providing comment if you would like. So in terms of liquor licensing in British Columbia, the approving body for all liquor licenses, and there's all kind of matter of kinds of liquor license, is the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, and they work under provincial legislation as well as regulation. So some types of new applications for new licenses and applications for amendment to existing licenses require what I'll call community input. So community input for food primary liquor license, and that's the liquor license, type of liquor license that we're focusing in on here. And as the name suggests, that means that the license is for establishments who are primarily providing food service and then primarily food service with liquor service as well. So there's only 2 types of services that require community input, and that's whether on a new license or an amendment to an existing license. And what we are looking here at both of these reports is amendments to existing license. So the first one, the legislation calls it patron participation entertainment, and that really means either dancing or karaoke. And then the second one that the community input is required on is liquor service past midnight. So if I was running a restaurant and I wanted to have liquor service, I would not have to, there would be no need to go through local government if the service ended at midnight. But if I wanted to provide patron participation at any time, then there would be opportunity for community input. Patron participation by law must end at midnight. So the purpose of community input from the province's point of view is to make sure that community concerns about noise, nuisance, and other impact are considered by the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch before they approve an application. And again, council has a right to opt out of gathering the community input. And by law, we have to pass a resolution in order to do that, then we forward to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch. So in this first report that you're looking at right now, that is one of your options, is to choose to make a resolution to forward to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch. So if a local government chooses to do the public consultation themselves, the legislation outlines very specific roles. So the job is to gather the views of nearby residents and businesses, and then to provide comment on mandatory considerations. And then, having looked at the mandatory considerations, the views of the residents, to submit a recommendation to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch on whether or not you think they should approve the application. Your mandatory considerations are potential for noise, the impact on the surrounding community, and in my conversation with representatives from the branch, they consider the surrounding community to be the immediate community to the subject property. And also to look at is if this requested change is going to shift the focus of operations from being primarily delivering food services to primarily delivering alcohol service. So provincial guidelines and regulations state simply that input is needed from nearby residents only. The province says that best practice standards are that it should be within so many meters, and we actually have a bylaw that guides this process. So they say we need to give notice to owners and occupants that are within 60 meters of the subject property. In practice, we actually extend that to 75 meters. We deliver by mail and by hand, and we also make referrals to the RCMP and any other applicable departments. And then we run 2 ads in the Westerly newspaper. So provincial guidelines and court rulings are that local governments need to take care not to consider irrelevant factors, and law cases, judgments by the courts have indicated that economic impact on an existing licensee is considered an irrelevant consideration. And it's totally up to council, your discretion, how much you want to place on different views. So if you're having comments from business community and comments from residents, you can decide if you want to place more weight on those views. That's completely up to council. So if you choose to opt out of this, then the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch will take on the role of getting the community input, and they will gather the views of nearby residents. When I've spoken to them, while they always don't want to say completely what they're going to do, in 99% of the cases, the practice is to have the applicant place a sign on their property. And then they also ask them, then they also will consider the mandatory considerations. So the amendment application that you have before you for Wolf and the Fog, and again, this is just step 1, where I'm just looking at what is your pleasure. Would you like the Control and Licensing Branch to undertake the consultation process, or district staff? So that amendment application, there's really 2 components to it. One is they're asking to have liquor service past midnight. Currently their license allows for service up till 12 a.m. They want to extend that by an hour and a half to 1:30 a.m. on a daily basis. And they are also asking for patron participation entertainment in the form of dancing. Now, I've spoken to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch on this too, and they say that if they were to look after the consultation process, that they would advertise these 2 amendments together. City of Nanaimo also does that, so that is what I will be following as well. But council should keep in mind that they are separate, so it's a possibility that none could be approved, one could be approved, or both could be approved. So that's it for the first report.
Thank you very much. Any questions about the process? Yes, Councillor Anderson.
Just not that it makes a big difference to my decision, but does dancing mean live entertainment as well would be allowed, or is this dancing just to
It's
DJ music? Or I'm wondering, or is there?
It's interesting. The Liquor Control and Licensing branch, you can have live music with just the regular license. But once you start adding some kind of patron participation, in this case dancing, then they want the consent, from community consent or involvement, community input.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burton.
Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation number 1, staff report application for permanent change to food permit license, etc., be received. And 2, that council provide direction to staff based on the following resolutions, that staff proceed to gather the view of residents potentially impacted by Wilton Fogg's application, etc., as written in the.
All right, thank you. So it's been moved in second, so it's clear to council. The motion is to receive the application for Wolf and the Fog, and that staff proceed to gather the views of residents potentially impacted, etc., etc. Are there any questions about this or discussion on the motion?
I just think it's fair because we've done that with every other application, so I
Okay,
think that's the way to go.
thank you. Councillor Thurgood?
Could you give us some sort of idea what the cost is for this community input? Like, for the applicant and for the district? I saw
The
something
cost
about,
for the applicant?
I saw something about $100 and $600.
There's a $100 non-refundable application fee, and then there is a $600 public notification fee that is refundable if a decision is made at some point not to proceed with the application for some reason, and provided that we have not already run the ads or delivered the notices. And then there's the staff time to prepare the reports and do the analysis.
Are those costs in legislation, or is that something in policy?
Those costs are in our bylaw.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? The motion is clear. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. So the motion carries. Thanks very much, Jane.
You're welcome. So I have a little bit again on this next application.
Okay.
Less. So the purpose of this report, and now we're looking at Jamie's Rainforest Inn Restaurant and Lounge. This is the final report. So the purpose is just to present the results of the public consultation and referral processes on this application, and then obtain council's direction on whether or not the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch should approve the amendment application. And again, you have 2 alternatives before you. So this amendment application is for liquor service past midnight. Currently, liquor service is provided up to 12 a.m. and this is a change that will go to 1 a.m. Again, by legislation, council needs to look at the mandatory considerations, and so I've sectioned those off in the report. As you will see, starting on page 4, I review the potential for noise, followed by the impact on the surrounding community, and then also dealt with if the requested change would shift operations from primarily food service to primarily liquor service. And when looking at the input that you've received on the potential for noise in the report, both what I have written on it and what we have received input from members of the community, council is asked in considering this potential to focus on the proposed change of an additional hour of service to result in increased noise and disturbances to residents in, again, the immediate area. And then on the impact on the community, council is again asked to weigh the benefit the increased hour of liquor service may have against any potential negatives to those, again, living in the immediate area. And that's it. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, more detailed questions on the report that you may have.
Okay. So first I will ask council for questions for Jane, but not to go into motion making, please, because we do have an opportunity for public input, which we'll do before we do the motion making. So does anyone have any questions for Jane on the report? Councillor Anderson.
Does the property, it appears that it may have two licenses, one in a restaurant area and one in kind of a pub area. Are they both covered under one license, or is there two licenses?
There's only one primary food liquor license, and that covers both the lounge area and the restaurant area. And by law, the full menu must be available the entire time that liquor service is being offered.
Any other questions for Jane? Councillor Hart?
Sorry, can I be reminded, are there other establishments in the community that have and use licensing to 1 o'clock?
I gave on page.
I remember you mentioned
on
that.
page 5. I focused on the number of liquor licenses that are in the immediate area and that are of the same nature, where they're part of accommodation.
Yeah.
So both the restaurant and the lounge are inside the inn accommodation. And so there's Long Beach Lodge, Middle Beach Lodge, and Wickeninish Inn. They are licensed to provide service, those three, till 12 a.m. And then Darwin's Cafe and the Tin Whisk Resort. Darwin's is licensed to provide liquor service till 1 a.m. and Tin Whisk till 1 a.m. Daily, and then 1 a.m. Monday to Saturday, and then 12 a.m. on Sunday. I didn't do research to find out, are those really their operating hours? Because a lot of times establishments will, their license will allow them to provide service to 1 a.m., but they may be just doing it for special events. And that's something that this particular application from Jamie's notes.
The reason I ask is that I'm aware of a liquor licensed operation that has received a lot of complaints from late night noise, or at least I've been, I don't know if the municipality has received complaints, but I think there have been letters to council, and there's certainly been, comment on it. And so I wasn't quite sure if that establishment had even that late a license. So I knew what was in the report. I just didn't know if there were any others.
Oh, there are others. There are
o'clock.
others, and I can't tell you them all off the top of my head. But I did request and received from the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch all the establishments, all their licenses, type of license they have, and what the license provides. But I can't tell you whether they're using them to, I think we have some that actually go to 2 a.m.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Jane? All right, thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we are accepting public input. If there's anyone who wishes to speak to the food primary liquor license amendment application.
Your Worship, Council. My name is Ryan Orr. I'm the General Manager at Jamie's Rainforest Inn. I look after both the hotel and restaurant. Obviously, you guys are aware of the application in front of you. I just wanted to address a couple things specifically. First, concern being noise. I would like to just remind everyone that we do run a hotel. The hotel is our primary source of business, primary source of revenue. Unlike some of the other applications before you and some of the ones that have come in the past from standalone restaurants, that is not what we're operating. Believe me, I'm more concerned about noise than anybody else is. Like I said, the hotel being our primary source of revenue, that is something that we are in no interest to disturb. So that will continue on for sure. I will point out that we have had no noise complaints or incidents since opening. That was verified through the RCMP, the bylaw, and the Liquor Control and Licensing Board. All of these have reported no infractions of any kind or no noise complaints to date. We are somewhat of an isolated property, heavily treed, with neighbors quite far away from us, unlike some of the operations located in the town core. As far as local responses, Obviously there was, the majority were in favor, but I will point out that our closest neighbors, the ones on immediately beside us, either fully supported us or did not comment at all. Those ones that are, those two households that did oppose us were located several lots away from us. So I think those were more concerns about overall societal impacts, if you guys have read them, as opposed to direct noise complaints. I'm quite certain that given we don't receive any noise complaints from our immediate neighbors, I'd be very surprised that the people 2 or 3 blocks down, or 2 or 3 lots down rather, would be receiving any noise issues. As far as the focus on food service, that is something that we certainly intend to do. I will point out, as Jane mentioned, that this is not something that we intend to do 7 nights a week, 365 days a year. This would be for special events, and this would also just allow us some flexibility during the summer. For anybody who does not believe that there is a demand for food service past midnight in Tofino, I do encourage you to come by at 10 to 12 and see the rush of people that we get, specifically from the other resorts, Long Beach Lodge, Middle Beach Lodge, Wickaninnishin. Their staff all rush to us at 10 to 12 when they get off work because they need somewhere to eat. We are one of 2 restaurants in Tofino that reliably serve food right up until midnight, the other being Shelter. Most other places close depending on how the business level is. These sliding closing times make it very, very confusing for people to know when to go somewhere. There are restaurants in town where you can walk in at 9 o'clock and they may be open or they may be closed, and you just never know till you get there. We are in a remote location where a lot of people do have to travel a bit of a distance to get there. We cannot have inconsistent closing times, or we'll just be shooting ourselves in the foot. People know they can get served just till midnight, so that's why they rush there when they get off work at other places to come and serve until midnight. We hear consistently, guys, wow, I wish you guys could serve food later. Of course, a component of that is the alcohol. I know that we can continue to serve past midnight, but those people who are walking in and trying to order food at midnight have just finished a long shift serving in a restaurant elsewhere. Of course, they want to have a drink with them with that as well. So again, we will continue to remain focused on food, but it's not just for the international clientele, the people who come in the summer, the people who are eating dinner at 11:30 at night. That's not what this is all about. It's also serving the local community and people who are looking for that demand. So, as far as the one concern that was raised for drunk driving in the RCMP letter, if any of you noticed that, I will point out that we do have our shuttle service available. We do make that available for all of our big functions, as well as it can be pre-booked. We do have staff on site that can drive that shuttle if people do need to get driven home, and that also was a concern of people milling around waiting for that one cab. We do have that shuttle that we have just for that reason. So. Then the only other thing I will point out is just to remind everyone that in September of 2014 we did get the patron participation entertainment endorsement that allowed dancing, just point out that we are now looking at about 8 or 9 months of that taking place, with again no noise complaints, no issues of that kind of thing. It is, as Jane said, we are allowed to have live music as part of our liquor license, but in order to actually allow people to dance, which is something that occasionally people do get up. We're very rarely, other than Halloween, a couple special events a year, do we actually have a dance floor. It's more just to give people that flexibility. At the end of the day, that's what this whole thing comes down to for us, is the flexibility to continue to meet the demand when it's there. But I will remind you that we're not intending to stay open until 1 a.m. every night, and we're certainly not looking to create another bar in town. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, Council, my suggestion is we'll just do a quick round and kind of hear from everyone before we go in.
Yes. I have one to read.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jane, go ahead. Yeah.
So this was Laura Locks, who she actually submitted a response, and then this email came in to Aaron this morning. I believe some councilors were copied on it.
Thank you.
Did you?
I read it.
No, thank you. I'm just going to read it out loud.
Do you need one too?
Yeah, because you read it? Okay. Thank you. I'll let you two share. Okay. So this says, Dear Aaron, I'm writing to express my comments today regarding the zoning changes for Jamie's Rainforest Inn located on, the address is incorrect here, 1252 Pacific Rim Highway, Tofino. My intention was to attend today's public hearing and make my comments at that time in follow-up from my husband's written comments previously submitted. However, due to the scheduling changes, I'm unable to attend the meeting today. Our property is situated on, again, it's the northern border of Jamie's Rainforest Inn. We have 2 young children, and we provide long-term rental housing for 2 very good tenants who enjoy the solitude of living in the forest. Our house is approximately 200 meters from the entryway of the inn, and we are concerned about the possible changes in clientele behavior that may result from extended hours of operation when coupled with an extended liquor license permit. In short, it is our concern that the proposed zoning changes are linked to a change in the use of Jamie's Rainforest Inn as a late-night drinking establishment, which in our view is non-compliant with the residential uses by which it is surrounded. I've attached my letter written in September 2014 as an expression of our concern that the extended liquor license hours could contribute to non-compliant uses. Consistent with that view, I am concerned that extending the hours of operation in combination with extended liquor license hours could lead to groups of noisy people loitering around the premises after hours, particularly if they are unable to find a safe source of transportation home at that hour of the night. When taken together, this is not the kind of commercial activity that is conducive to building strong community cohesion in community neighborhoods. I ask that you please present my concerns to council today in my absence. I won't read out the letter on the flip side, which I believe would have been submitted directly to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch. Jamie submitted an application, it is noted in my report. After working with their primary food for a while, they submitted an application to have patron participation in the form of dancing. Council for that decision chose to opt out, and so it was managed by the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, and this would have been a letter, I'm assuming, submitted in response to their call for opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So I suggest we just do a quick round of initial feedback and comments, and then we can go into our motion making. So Councilor Thurgood, maybe I'll ask you to start.
Overall, I'm not supportive of it in one side, and yet it's a large piece of property. The neighbors are far apart, but so that would be in favor of Jamie's, but to speak against it would be that you're pushing our resources. Our police are on until, if they've got a full complement, they're on till 3 a.m. If you're going to extend the drinking hours to 1, then it's at least till 1:30 before the table's got to be cleared and people leave. And then they spill out where they spill out onto the multi-use path or the roadway, in particular out there, because it's vehicular traffic. And I know Ryan expressed that the van is there, or the vehicle's there. I think it's a well-run establishment, but I just don't. I don't agree with pushing the hours back further than what they are. We've already refused shelter, which was, in my opinion, a well-run establishment. We refused shelter on the extension of hours, and I think I would hold the line on this too, same way.
Thank you, Councilor Thurgood. Councilor Thick?
I'm not in favor of supporting the extended hours, and the reason is because we've been asked to gather the views of nearby residents. So nearby residents to me means those that are I know it says 60 meters, but we're in a rural place, so I think adjacent is the word that was used in the report. And the 3 things that we're asked to consider are the potential for noise, the impact on community, and the change or the shift from food to liquor. In the report, we have received 4 opposed to the increased hours. plus we had one police report, and then this morning we have another. So we have a total of 6 who don't support, and for me, that's 5 more than I need. The proximity of the, I would disagree with the proponent, the proximity of the 2 properties. One is the writer this morning, and I'm sorry I don't know the address, but the other is 1260 on the south side. 1260 didn't respond, but as I understand it from the Google map we were given, the writer this morning is immediately adjacent. And if you measure using the Google map, you will see too that Pownell Place, the people who also opposed it, are equidistant apart. The people who supported the application, there were 6 who supported, and there's 1 absentee landlord. So I would be in favor of discounting that. So we are left with 5 who supported, and of those 5, 1 spoke to the noise, which is what we've been asked to do. Those people do not live adjacent. They are, in one case, on the northern end of a 5 to 10 acre property, and 1264 is next door but 1. So both who responded in favor are next door but 1. The people who responded against are immediately adjacent. So I take those views very seriously, and as I said earlier, I think and the police report too, we haven't even asked the ambulance or the hospital. I am well acquainted with the number of phone calls that come between 1 and 2 in the morning from the hospital, and so I do not support the extension of the hours.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Blanchett?
I think in general, I would support the extension of the hours. The RCMP report was a red flag for me. The staffing concerns and the lack of a late night taxi. But I think the proponent has addressed those fairly well, and what tips it for me is that there have been no noise complaints, and there's a very strong impetus for the proponent to control their own noise because of the accommodation provided there. I appreciate the information we've just had about the late night clients being local staff who are just coming off shift. I think there's a segment of our population, because of our tourism industry, that kind of lives semi-diurnally, lives in a later time frame than many of us, and there's not much to serve them in the way the opening hours are these days. And I like the idea of having an alternative to Jack's Pub for the late night crowd. So I think overall, I feel a bit reluctant, but I think overall, because of the good track record already, and the clear concern that Jamie's Rainforest Inn has always shown, they've provided this shuttle not as a stopgap for this particular application, but they've had it for months and months. So I think they're responsible enough that I can support this without any reservations.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
I'm in support of this. I believe that they have the proponents have been very responsible in providing the shuttle and keeping their operation free of complaints. I also agree with Councillor Blanchett that we only have currently one liquor license, serving mainly the downtown area after 12 o'clock, and I think a good proportion of the people that work late are at that end of town, and so they have to travel west to whatever, to have their after work meal or drink.
Thank you.
My natural inclination would be to say no, because felt the impacts of late night drinking establishments, and it's not necessarily on the premises, but it spills out, especially onto the multiple use path. And unfortunately, if you have your licensing ending at 1, you don't have that impact until almost 2. And some of the patterns of carryover even extend further past when our RCMP would even be working, where we've even had incidents on the beaches that have resulted in serious injury, people coming out of the bar at night and then further carrying on down the beaches and so forth. So it's a dilemma always about managing this kind of need for entertainment and socializing to people who work late at night in our tourism industry, and balancing that off against the potential impacts. Unfortunately, we can't grant this on a condition of give it a year and review it. And at the same time, what's working for me in favor of it is that I would like to see places that people can gather, so they don't go down to the beaches and create those kinds of impacts as well that we've had. And still, if food is the issue and the liquor cuts off at midnight, people can still order their drinks, have some food till 1 in the morning. The food can still be served. It's about the liquor. So I think I'm probably going to come down and to not support it, based on the concerns of the immediate neighbors around noise and so forth. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Sorry. Can't be clearer.
Okay. Thank you.
I won't support this. I'm always concerned what the neighbourhood thinks, and to get one complaint is enough for me. And I was actually surprised that there was as many people nodding support it as was. So I think I can hear the noise if the wind's blowing in the right direction over the road. So if I live closer, I'm sure it must be worse for people there. And there may not be noise complaints now, but if it went till 1 o'clock in the morning or 1:30, I'm sure there would be. So I won't support this application.
Okay, thanks. I'll add my 2 bits. I support the application. I, like Councillor Blanchette, find it compelling that the applicant is operating a hotel immediately behind, and I know that the hotel is not the most expensive in Tofino and therefore is quite attractive to families, and that the people staying in the hotel would be likely the first to complain if they're anyone like me when I complain when I stay in a hotel that has a pub in it. I also agree that it provides an alternative from going to the beaches, and I think that there are enough younger people living in our community that do require that alternative. I find past behavior to be the best indicator of future behavior, and so just to echo again what Councillor Blanchette said, the shuttle isn't being offered as a new service to make this application more attractive, but it is a service that the applicant's been providing for some time. I'm also compelled by the fact that there have been no noise complaints to this time, and that although I understand, Councillor Thurgood, what you're saying about shelter and did we set a precedent with that, I feel that it's a different situation because it's a much lower density neighborhood, and that shelter is a larger, busier restaurant that had more impact on the immediate neighbors. There are many more immediate neighbors, but in this case, not so much. So that's how I will be voting. And at this point, any more conversation and any dialogue?
If council turns down the application, does the applicant have an opportunity to come back again, as somebody said, a year from now?
Jane?
I talked to the Liquor Control and Licensing branch about that, and they were ambiguous. There aren't any, guidelines for that.
Okay.
Councillor Zick?
I just wanted to make one point, and that is that the report states, and I quote, DOT is responsible for gathering the views of nearby residents and businesses. So let's just remember that statement. We are confusing, I think, the views or the wishes of patrons with those of the residents. That is what we are being asked as the council to do. And that is why I made the response I did. So I'm taking that literally at its word. And so that, I just want to say that, you know, sometimes we talk about what the patrons want, but this is specifically asking us to gather the views of the nearby residents.
Thank you for that. And for myself, I'll respond that there were responses from neighbors in the immediate neighborhood that were both for and against. And so, anybody else? All right, would somebody like to make a motion? Councillor Thick.
I think the first motion is to receive the report, is it not?
Yeah, we could do that separately if you like, or you can make them, yeah, let's do that separately actually. So if you, Councillor Thick then moves to, that the staff report be received. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor McMaster. All in favor? Thank you, motion carried. Okay.
I'll move that having gathered the views of nearby residents, businesses, and taken into consideration the mandatory criteria prescribed by the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, the District of Tofino Council recommends that the LCLB not approve the food primary liquor license number 305727 amendment application submitted by Jamie's Rainforest Inn, Restaurant and Lounge, 1258 Pacific Rim Highway, to extend its hours of liquor service from 12 a.m. midnight to 1 a.m. Monday to Sunday.
Thank you. Discussion. Okay, seconded. Moved and seconded. Discussion on this? Any further discussion? Okay then, I'll call the question. In favor of the motion? Thank you. And opposed to the motion? Thank you. The motion carries. All right. We're going to move on now into the Neighbourhood Traffic Committee recap, and we have a report from our CAO.
Your Worship, Council, at the April 14th Council meeting, there was discussion regarding parking and traffic at Chesterman Beach, and that came on the heels of a very busy Easter weekend. Councillors raised concern that no action had been taken following a reporting out from the district-appointed traffic committee, and Council directed that staff report back on what had become of the traffic committee's work. So this is that report back. The traffic committee was struck in February of 2011 with terms of reference that are appended to the staff report. October 25th, 2011, the traffic committee reported out to Council's Committee of the Whole with and the recommendations some recommendations went from Committee of the Whole and were endorsed by Council on November the 8th of 2011. Two items were requested for report back from staff. One, that no parking be implemented on one side of Chesterman and Lynn Road, and secondly, that an examination be done of expanding parking at South and Middle Beach parking lots. On March 27th, 2012, staff reported back regarding no parking on the side of the road. Council did not take action on that at that time, but directed that nothing be done until traffic calming was addressed. It seems that at some point between then, in the next few months, traffic calming was addressed, and on June 12th, Council directed that no parking be instituted on one side of Chesterman Beach and Lynn Road with a zero tolerance enforcement approach. That if lot expansion occurs, parking lot expansion occurs, Council consider a complete ban on parking on the two roads in question. And a resolution regarding purchasing of wheel clamps was considered by Council and defeated. Staff were directed to report back some stats on parking tickets. So it's the view that the work of the traffic committee has been substantially reported out on. Parking has been implemented, so parking is banned on one side of Chesterman and Chesterman Beach and Lynn Road. It's not clear to the extent to which zero tolerance was implemented. We do currently enforce at that location as our resources allow, and as was discussed 2 weeks ago, resources were not available on the Easter weekend, and we're working to resolve that with some budget recommendations that Council has seen and will continue to come forward. There was an idea that staff enforce some provisions of the Traffic Act, and that's actually not something that our bylaw enforcement officers can do. They enforce municipal bylaws only. Parking areas have not been expanded at this point, and there's 2 comments that I've made in the report in that regard. Most of the demand that we're seeing at those peak times, November and April, are for North Chesterman Beach, and as one longtime resident and server put it to me, if you're going to be expanding parking at South Chesterman Beach, you might as well put it on Mars. It's just too far from where the surfing is happening during those peak times. I mean, that is something that could be done. I think about a dozen spaces could be added at the south parking lot. As I mentioned, the resolution regarding wheel clamps was in fact defeated, so we have not pursued that further. And stats regarding parking tickets, I don't know if they were immediately shared. The request was that for the 3 years prior to 2012, that parking stats be forwarded to council. Don't know if that was sent, but several times since in the 2 years that I've been here, in reporting out on summer bylaw activity, we have reported on ticketing stats. That's also in the municipal annual report that goes out every year. And I think that there was an email that went out in the last few weeks again, indicating number of tickets and payment and so on. So all that said, I think as staff we continue to appreciate, as does council, as I think does the neighborhood, that we have, we don't have it perfected, the parking for Chesterman Beach at this point. That said, I think that there has been a report out done on the work of the traffic committee. There's more work to be done. At this point, we're looking for some better signage. When I do drive through there on the weekends, I notice that people tend to park up against the no parking signs, and there's some really skilled parallel parkers who can fit themselves in between 2 very close together no parking signs. The message obviously isn't getting out there, and the view of the neighborhood, and I would agree with that to some degree, is that we do need more regular enforcement there, and as our summer bylaw program gets going in the next few weeks, we will be out there more regularly and certainly on weekends. That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor McMaster?
Yeah, I've got a few comments. He said it's not known if in 2011 bylaw staff were given direction to enforce parking bylaws with zero tolerance. Do you know why it wasn't passed on?
That's not what I said. I said I don't know if it was passed on.
Oh,
I'd have no way of knowing that because everyone involved at that time is no longer with the district.
Well, the managers are here.
But not the manager that's responsible for bylaw. That's changed.
Well, I think it was
we have a
Mr.
different
Rogers.
CEO, we have a different bylaw.
I think it was Mr. Rogers that was in charge of bylaw at the time.
You may be right. So I will follow up with Mr. Rogers if that's an important point to you.
Okay, and the second thing is, I'm not quite sure when you're talking about enforce the Traffic Act, just as you weren't here, I'll give you a bit of history. We request for some speed bumps, and the idea was we put in speed cushions so they could be used as crosswalks. So that way we could get funding from RMI. As they were going to be used as crosswalks, we put yellow cross hatching either side, as in the Traffic Act, to deter people from parking there. So the zero tolerance was for the idiots that still park in that area, or even on top of the speed bump. So as you've said yourself, it's our road. We can do what we want with our road. So it's not a question of enforcing the Traffic Act, it's enforcing no parking. And to say zero tolerance was, one, was not to issue a warning ticket, to actually give a ticket, and B, as has happened many times, with a bylaw officer just to drive past in his van and not even stop when he sees someone parked on top of a speed bump. So that was why the zero tolerance was there. And then in another report, Oh yeah, the rare parking at South Chesterman. I wouldn't broadcast that too much because that was where a lot of the neighbourhood said the parking lots aren't being used, so why should we allow parking on the street? I'm just making that as a comment, but we tried to avoid that. And the third thing is on page 50, you make references to 150, you make references to climate change for investing in new infrastructure. So are you trying to say that on Lynn Road, Chesterman Beach Road, where there's large tax base, that because of rising sea level, you're not prepared to invest in infrastructure? Because that's what I could infer from that statement.
I don't know what you're referencing. My report that I'm speaking to is between pages 95.
Well, I'm
and
quoted
98.
on page 150, which is included in the package.
The historical report
Oh,
from
the
Mr. Rogers
historical
to
report.
our
Yeah.
prior CAO.
Because I think you should be really careful broadcasting things like that to a neighbourhood that pays a large tax base if you're saying we might not be investing in infrastructure
I think
because
that's
of rising sea level.
a report from 2012, so
It's still
It's-
included for public knowledge.
it's a staff report
Yeah.
that's publicly available and has been since March 19th, 2012, so.
It's a staff report that, you know, the inference that was made 2 weeks ago was that there was no reporting back from staff. It's a staff report to inform council that there was reporting back.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm
just
just
part of the
making-
historical
I'm just
package.
making that comment.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Anybody else questions regarding this report?
And also, before you even, that is the wrong PowerPoint. That is not the PowerPoint I presented. That is a PowerPoint that was presented to the traffic committee, and then it was updated to
Okay.
council, and I presented it. I brought it in on a memory stick, put it in, and you guys didn't save it at the time. So
Okay, and that's what's unfortunately in our record.
yeah, I'm just updating.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thurgood.
Just one item is that the District of Tofino staff are not authorized to enforce the Traffic Act, but we are referring to the provincial law, right?
Correct.
Right. But we do have bylaws that
We do have bylaws, and in fact, you know, for full comment, we do have no parking signs, I think, at most of those speed humps that are doubling as crosswalks. So we can enforce where we have decent signage.
and the sections that are referred to, or not, they're not referred to, but the sections in the Provincial Motor Vehicle Act or the Traffic Act are all covered in our traffic and parking bylaws under sections 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 to do with parking violations, parking offenses, and removal of vehicles. So, you know, all I'm saying is I can appreciate we cannot enforce the provincial statute, but we can, in fact, and should be enforcing our own municipal bylaws.
Thank you. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment. I know that for the downtown parking, we've looked at, you know, what is the walking distance in the zones, and you know, it might be the sort of normal understanding that it's too far to walk to check the surf from this parking lot to that, but is it really, like, what are we talking about, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you know, like, so I don't know how we communicate that as what's reasonable for people to do to get their vehicles parked and to go check out that surf, and I'd say within 10-15 minutes is walking is pretty reasonable. Anyway.
Thank you for your comment. Any other questions about this report? Councillor Anderson?
Well, I'm glad that we're looking into improved signage. I'm pretty sure that some of the signs have disappeared, or fell over, been removed or something. There's a couple sections where there's quite a distance between the no parking signs now. And my recollection is that there were more signs when they were originally installed. I've always maintained that the signs weren't quite adequate. It's the really small, no parking signs, doesn't have any other information on it on the one side. And also the crosswalks are not marked with a crosswalk sign as you drive, so I'm glad that we're looking into improving that and also improving enforcement. So.
Thank you. Okay, a motion to receive the report. Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Seconded by Councillor Thurgood. Any final discussion on this? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Thank you very much, Patty. All right. Next, we have a report on the 2015 council grant process that's in your package, and 2 recommendations, which I ask that we treat separately. And the first is that staff be authorized to release the council grant funds as listed in the appendix. And the second one is regarding direction on the balance of the funds. So could we please first discuss the first one?
I'll move first.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster. And thank you, seconded by Councillor Fick. Okay, any questions or discussion on the motion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you very much. Motion carried. Okay, and so there is an amount that is left, and maybe before any motion making, we'll just have some discussion. I also want to point out to council that we don't have to decide this today. Councillor McMaster.
Can I ask if the money that's left over can be held on and transferred to next year and just added to next year's grants? Or does it all have to be used up this year?
Thank you.
Your Worship, Councillor McMaster, typically we don't carry over budget amounts. We could budget for a higher amount in council grants equal to the amount that's left over this year. So we could either just leave that amount and not spend it, and then increase the budget next year, or just go into surplus if we don't. Or we can reallocate it to another line item in the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Blanchett?
As a frequent volunteer in the arts community, we've often run up against the sort of deadline, the once-a-year grant, and very often a good opportunity will come along in the middle of that year. So it would be nice to have a source of funds that you could apply, that you could take advantage of when the opportunities come along, rather than waiting for the next year when the opportunity may have evaporated. So I would prefer to leave this $2,400 on the table so that we can award it if and when an opportunity comes up for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fick?
Yeah, I would agree, and the reason also being that the grants are about to be announced for the CBT, from the call for projects, and you know, maybe there's somebody who did not receive but really is a worthy candidate from our community, and I think that may happen. And I too would concur that I would like to see it remain open for this year, and that somebody who is worthy but may not receive on another in another organization could then reapply, or perhaps a new opponent could apply.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bird?
That wasn't my thing, Thank you. Yeah, I would like to leave it on the table. I'm kind of a bit of the mind of us rethinking a bit about the grants and where it's valuable to give grants, and where it's valuable to empower organizations to find sources of funding, or create ways in which the community can otherwise support initiatives. And I'm thinking about that, and may, you know, hopefully may bring something back to council to consider about that. But at this point, I'd like us not to do anything with it.
Okay. Councillor Turner?
Yeah, I agree. But how would we, if an application came forward, because this council decided to go with a participatory budget, and we had no input at all into it, if somebody came forward, or a group came forward now asking for this money, even though we felt it was worthy, how would we proceed with it? Would it go through the participatory budget process again?
No. But I'll ask Nyla just to maybe clarify existing policy, and then I'll provide some response too. Thank you.
So we repealed the council grant policy in order to move forward with this process. So with the 2,400 that's left, and I guess what we could do, because in the absence of a policy, really council can move forward and allocate the funds as they wish. I would recommend a simple process because there are minimal funds. Perhaps a call for letters later on in the year so that everyone has an opportunity to submit. I wouldn't recommend going through the participatory budgeting process for that amount of funds.
Okay, thank you. So therefore, I think what I'm hearing is let's let it sit on. We're not going to provide any direction at this time. There might be a few ideas that come forward, and that we, as a council, will make a decision about that $2,400. But we'll rest for now.
I'm willing to let that to go along with that, but the amount we make it available to some other applicant, I think, is very unfair to all the people who went to considerable effort to go through that process. So, if anything, I would prefer to see council identify something for that towards, rather than have somebody come forward late, didn't do that amount of work and that amount of preparation to seek a grant. So, just want to point that out. In terms of fairness, I think it'd be better if a councillor or a couple councillors has a good project in mind, see something that comes up, that they bring it forward, and not just a single applicant.
Thank you. I agree. Councilor Master?
Yeah, I'd agree with that because you know very well as soon as people find out there's some money left over, someone's going to say they want it. So I personally I'd be happy just to transfer it over to next year.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, that gives us some food for thought then about a council-initiated project, or that's something that might fall within our strategic plan, or there might be some other kind of idea, and I think Councillor Bart might have something in mind that she'll bring forward in the near future, and we can discuss it then. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone. All right, we'll move on then. Before we do move on from this, I just really want to thank Nyla for all your assistance through the participatory budgeting process, and you put a lot of work into this, and I know that you were really busy at that time. The timing wasn't the best, and the process went off really well. I really enjoyed the day, and I'm looking forward to hearing back from the people who did apply, as well as those who weren't so happy about the new process, and that'll guide our decision making for the future. Councillor Britt?
Thank you. I am wondering if there's some way to move some of these granting dates to another time, or perhaps earlier in the year, as early as January or something, to you know, kind of not have the pressure on right at end of year and audit and all that type of thing, but also giving, you know, early in the year a level of certainty, so organizations can either leverage those funds to acquire grants in other places, where sometimes one of the requirements is a show of community support, or you know, at least help with their annual plans. So I don't, you know, maybe that could come back as a motion another time. I'd like to hear from Director of Finance about thoughts about that.
Good. And our other staff are heavily involved in some of the other grant
also,
streams
yes,
too.
that's true.
So
the other,
good to take that into consideration. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on, and the next is the 2015 RMI event support application review and awarding, and we have a verbal report coming from RMI services. So take it away.
Council should have before them the package for 2015 RMI grants. It should include a copy of the event grant policy. That was a new policy last year, so this is our second go round with it. An evaluation summary sheet that provides a snapshot of this year's applications. It looks like an Excel sheet shaded green, like this one here. a scored evaluation worksheet. This is the colorful worksheet for each application, which assesses how well each application aligns with the policy, and a copy of the actual application that was submitted by the applicant. Now, the colorful scored worksheet is something new we're trying this year, and this is in response to feedback we had regarding last year's process. And it's, council may disagree with how staff has scored these, but it's intended to more clearly link the application to the event grant criteria. So I'll be interested to know if staff, council finds it helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yvonne is just going to pass around a worksheet here that just gives a little bit more of a description about why things are scored the way they were. For example, something may be scored very weak, even though that event we know it to be strong in that area, but they didn't submit that information as part of their application, and that's all we can really go on is what they submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. This represents a lot of work on behalf of council. I thank you. Okay, so what we have before us are 14 applications for the RMI Event Support Grant, and the total amount of funds that have been requested is $53,400. There is only $20,000 available. So this council is getting much more familiar with the way we've been going through grant applications as we did just a week or so ago with the arts and culture grants, and as those members who were on council in the last term, we've done several times. So I recommend a similar approach unless somebody has something else they wish to suggest. In which case we'll look yes, sorry, Councillor Bart?
Yeah, I think in the last process we went through, there were some that were just kind of taken off the table.
And that's exactly what we can do now.
So
okay.
Then what we're talking about is realistic.
So it would be helpful if, like we've had before, we had a spreadsheet, because it's faster for the spreadsheet to add up the numbers than it is for us. Is that?
I got one over here.
Oh, you do?
Can
okay.
Switch this to your computer.
That would be fabulous. Thank you. That makes it a lot easier for us. Perfect.
Okay, good.
Okay, terrific. All right, so council, who would like to begin?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
There was the event strategy was done and completed, and it didn't look to me like priorities or considerations from the event strategy were really incorporated into this. Can you speak to that? Thank you.
Yes, so the event strategy was adopted after the call for applications was issued. So we didn't feel that it was fair to then change the criteria against which the applications would be scored, because we've given them the criteria, we've given them the policy, please submit your application. Before they had submitted, we adopted the strategy. So going forward, I think we will see the strategy incorporated more, and perhaps even a bit of a policy change.
Okay. Okay, so are there any that you feel didn't meet the eligibility criteria and should be removed? Councillor Blanchette?
I think the prison garden one for $10,000, scored very low on the rating sheet here, and it's a pretty high amount of money. So I think I'd feel comfortable removing that entirely.
Others? Any
That
disagreement,
one
Councillor
jumped out
Harrison?
at me too, as the one I supported the least.
Okay. All right, so if you could enter 0 in there for now, and then we go back and we review it also. Anything else? Councillor Burke?
Yeah, as much as I love the Burweiler Kids event, I had reduced them to just 1,000 as a sort of an amount to give a nod to help support the initiative. But it is, by naming it in a commercial sense, I'd rather see it linked to existing surf events as an element of. I'm kind of, because we do broadly support surf and the development of surf events, I want it to support them in part. So I didn't eliminate them completely, but I did eliminate the Saltwater Classic because I don't feel it fits some of the kind of aims and objectives of the RMI.
Okay. Are you influenced at all by the fact that through the Arts and Culture Grant process, we did make an award to the Burweiler Kids Classic? And or are you influenced at all by the fact that it is missing the same information that the Prism Garden Wellness Festival is also missing?
It's more about what's missing and where it fits. I think in the future, especially as this event strategy unfolds, there might be something further that develops with that event and how it plays out in that context of the overall surf events. It's just not there right now to receive a very high level of funding. And you know, it might be that it just doesn't get funded at all, given they have received some money already. So.
Others? Particularly on these two, yes.
Yeah, just on that one, I mean, we just had a presentation from Dr. Hasselback that talked about the impoverishment of children. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't really like the name. You know, it has a commercial feel to it, so we'll leave that aside. But I mean, I just think this is one of the few that really targets kids, and I'm in favor of supporting it to an extent.
Councillor Harrison?
Well, I thought that this was the right category for that event to apply in, and not the arts and culture grants, and I'd be in support of complying with their request. I would consider removing what we did provide in the arts and culture part of it, but well, no, it does have a small part of it that's arts and culture, but yeah, I think this is more properly the place for this grant. There was one. I thought that the Tofino Food and Wine Festival, my feeling is that it's fairly well supported through ticket sales, so that's one that I would also.
If you don't mind, Councillor Anderson, I'd like to close out the discussion on the Burweiler Kids Classic
Oh,
and
okay,
the
sorry.
Saltwater Classic, and then we'll move on
Yep.
to the
Well, I'd say that Burweiler needs some support. I think it's in the right category. I would support the full amount what they're asking. So
Okay, do you want to make a suggestion?
2,000.
Okay, any feelings about that? Different? All right.
I had 1,000, so we'll see where that plays out
See
as
what
things.
comes.
Okay, so Yvonne, if you don't mind adding 2,000 for now. Thank you. Saltwater Classic?
That's 0.
So if you
I was in two minds about this. I mean, I mean, they donate a lot of money to community things, but then I thought, well, it's kind of backhanded. We donate some money and then to get it back to the community.
And I
So-
just want to point out again that we have a solid set of criteria on which to judge proposals against, so.
So I'm inclined to 0.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
0 plus. See where we are. No.
Okay, so Councillor Anderson, did you want to come back to the Food and Wine Festival?
Yeah, I just believe that this has been, I believe it's been, I'm not sure actually if it's been supported before, but I think it's grown to a point where it does very well without the support from the district, monetary support. So if I would be in support of removing them.
Other points of view, or?
Willing to listen to other.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bart?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that sort of philosophically looked at around the event strategy is how to grow and strengthen existing festivals, and sometimes, you know, just an injection of cash to help address sort of, or just to yeah, well, basically help address things that have come up as issues in the sort of smooth development and maintaining or growing of that event is appropriate. And I think in this application, my understanding is the Tofino Culinary Guild is taking over some of the food aspects of it and addressing it through the suppliers. And there's quite an interesting and unique approach around how to do outreach around the provision of food and support of the chefs in getting the supplies they need, so that this isn't coming out of their pocket more. When this festival started, there was, you know, culinary tourism was not on the map, and it is largely because of the work that's been done to develop this festival. And to me, you know, if they're saying, you know, we want to add this element and try this on as a new direction, I think that's very supportable, and I would like to, because we haven't had to give the money, and just, you know, it's not per se district money, this is resort municipality monies made for the purpose of growing and developing festivals, so that's my thinking on it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor McMaster?
I'm inclined not to support it, maybe just because I think this festival has established itself. They say in the write-up that 90% of the revenue comes from ticket sales. Tickets have increased, I think, from $90 to $120 per person this year. There's no doubt, having attended it, that most of the locals that do attend are from the higher income bracket. So I'm inclined not to support it. Certainly not to the full extent that they're asking for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blanchett?
I'm inclined to support it. One of the things I was looking at is how many people were served by each of these events, and the Saltwater Classic, for instance, was anticipated 65 participants, whereas the Food and Wine Festival anticipates 750. As well, it's early June, so it's kind of in a shoulder season, or at least not in the main part of the season. And I agree with Councillor Bart about helping even an established festival to build itself, go off in a new direction. So I would be up around the 2,000 mark myself.
Okay, any other suggestions for this one? A different amount? Councillor
Yeah,
Bart?
I'd just comment that for Councillor McMaster's information, I think the increased per ticket price was to decrease the number of people that tickets were sold to kind of maintain a quality of festival experience. So that was my understanding.
That just adds a plus to my argument.
Well, because it was felt, and that's something we don't want to see, is that, you know, there's thresholds where you have a festival that will have successful, you know, feedback and be reviewed positively, and that once you push that threshold, then you start to diminish that. And so far, you know, we've been fortunate that none of our festivals, I think, have really gone there. But that was a concern, as my understanding with this one, was that it was getting to be too many people and to just bring the numbers back and still to make it economically viable. So just,
Okay.
because I've asked some questions.
So Councillor Blanchette has suggested 2,000. I think I heard 1,000 on the side from somebody. I'm sorry, I can't remember who.
I don't think a number was
No
set.
number? Okay.
I've got 1,500 at the moment.
Others? Can you have one more?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, just, I'd say 1,500, but no more.
Okay, so let's start with 1,500, and remember, we'll come back to these. Thanks, Adana. Okay. Were there any others that stood out to council? Yes, Councillor Blanchette.
I thought the 3 top-rated ones should get what they asked for, or pretty close to it. The Shorebird Festival, the Cultural Heritage Festival, Carving on the Edge Festival.
Others?
Well, I'd agree with that, and I would, if we have to reduce, I would probably reduce Carving on the Edge a little bit, but let's see where we end up.
Okay.
Just because we supported Carving on the Edge
Through the other
quite a few
process.
years, and it's getting quite well established.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they got a big grant from our
Yeah.
April?
culture as well.
I just wanted to point out that the first 2 are sort of score leaders, but then the following 4 are actually all rated the same. Following 5 actually scored the same.
Thank you.
Just a general comment. I think we have kind of sloppy grant writers in our community, and that we should, if there are criteria attached to a grant, we will be doing the grant writers a service if we put a lot of weight on that, rather than people just kind of firing in a grant. Kind of not targeted properly. These are not long grant applications, so I think we can insist to a large extent that the grant criteria be met, and if they aren't met, I think that'll be a good lesson. It'll be a good lesson for next year if we don't grant to those those applicants that haven't met the criteria well. I think we can encourage that culture in our grant writers, our applicants.
And also, I just want to point out that we can make a grant conditional. So we could, for example, grant $1,000 to a society conditional on providing the information that was requested in the grant. So that's an option that's available to council. Okay, Councillor Brett.
Thank you. I had granted the Shorebird Festival the 1,800 in my notes, and you know, looking at this, you know, the buttons and everything. The Cultural Heritage, Carving on the Edge, and Queen of the Peak, I have reduced all of them. And Cultural Heritage, I granted 2,000 again, and some of those aspects, it's one, there's other avenues for funding for them. It's a broad regional initiative, and I think that, you know, it's appropriate to kind of match other levels of support. So I just have them at 2,000.
Can I?
And my thinking was in keeping with what's been applied for in other
Yeah.
places. And so
May I suggest that we just stop there for a second, and let's just finish off the Tofino Shorebird Festival, and then have the discussion about the
Okay.
Cultural Heritage Festival, and then and go through them one by one. So does anybody disagree with full granting to the Tofino Shorebird Festival? Okay, that's an easy way of doing it. Thank you, Ivana. The Cultural Heritage Festival, so there's a suggestion to fund at a partial amount.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I find the concept as proposed, it's a bit of a stretch for me, but it fits very well with the end of September, which I think is good when you're talking about. So I mean, I would be willing to go 2,000, 2,500.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Councillor Bart, what was the number you started?
I had it at 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is Cultural Heritage Festival. Okay, so let's do that for now. Councillor?
I would put it substantially higher than that. This is a new festival, a new effort. It's in the right time of year. It's got a lot of possibility in that it has a new theme every year, so it's not just grinding the same thing year after year after year. I think there's a lot of possibility for this festival, and that we should help them grow it.
Okay.
I'd put it
Councillor?
at 4,000.
Councillor Blanchette, I'd put it at 3.
Councillor Winchester?
I'm inclined to go the full amount. My philosophy is get these guys, whoever it is, kick-started off and then back down over the number of years. And I like the idea of this festival, and I think we should try and give them the full amount and hope we succeed.
Okay, so I've heard 2, 3, 4. It feels like a game show, but it's not. And we did award through the Arts and Culture grants an amount. I can't recall off the top of my head. I'm going to suggest, council, we start with 3 and then come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can everyone live with that for now? Okay, thank you. Carving on the Edge.
Yeah, I'll speak to that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I had put it at 3, and I know that we've supported it substantially, but I still have the view that this could be a signature event for the region. We talk about reconciliation, cross-cultural events and so forth, and it's building on that kind of relationship. But it is also what makes it really unique and distinct from just about anything else being able to be offered anywhere else. With the proximity that we have to bring visitors out. And, I think it's wise of us to kind of keep our sights on that as something that has a lot of potential, that kind of counterpoints the surfing side of things. And but I do see in future that they have to kind of hopefully get that charitable status, get more on the game around other sources of funding. But they've, as I recall from the finances, they brought in a lot of money into the community, both in the grants and so forth. So what we support actually plays out with a lot of other money that comes back into the area. So
I would support 3 for now. I don't think I'd like to back down from the 5 that requested, but
Okay.
I could go with 3 as well. I had it a little higher at 4, but
Others?
3.
3, okay. 3,000, thank you, Ivana. The Oyster Festival. Councillor Thick?
I'm not inclined to support the full amount. It's been going a long time, and there's the opportunity, as in others, to recoup some of the costs through ticket sales and alcohol sales. So I think there's a fair trade-off there. And
Others?
no, I'm not inclined to support it to the full amount. It's been well established, and it seems to just get busier and busier. It doesn't seem to have any problems selling out. So
I agree, the same sort of rationale as the Tofino Food and Wine Festival. I think it should have some support, but not full amount. I'd say 15 as well.
Okay. Any disagreement with 1,500? Okay.
12.50, that's all the same.
Okay, Feast / Otolith. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, I had them down for 2,000, but I also had the Oyster Festival down for 2,000. So mind you, the ask is more than double. But again, it's for the Dockside Festival and stuff. I just can't quite get a handle on that festival and what it is and how it plays out. But I see that giving some money, but what keeps coming back to me for this or Oyster Festival or the others is how we can support them and help them to find other ways to support themselves. And I think the festival strategy over the next year hopefully will start to address some of that. I have them down for 2,000.
Same me.
Okay. Others? Yes, Councillor.
Didn't we, last year, we turned down Odalith, didn't we? And they ended up going to they ended up going to Ucluelet only.
Their intention always has been to have the main event in Ucluelet. They have the 2 nights of music in Ucluelet, and then they also have a Tofino event, which they are proposing again this year.
But they didn't last year.
I think
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
No, it
No.
got cancelled. Something
Yeah.
went wrong somewhere.
Yeah.
There was-
At the brewery.
There was
Yeah.
still an event in Tofino
Yeah.
for Odalith last year. I attended.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was going to be.
Pretty sure that it
The
happened.
police were against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Blanchett?
One problem I had with the Odalith feast thing is in their presented budget, they're talking about a $22,000 budget, and 11,000 of that is a coordinator fee. And I thought that was a bit inordinately high, which made me less inclined to support it to the full amount.
Okay. So I've heard 2,000. Does anybody disagree with 2,000?
I'd even go lower.
Yeah, 15.
1,000.
I like that.
15. Does anybody feel strongly that 1,000 is too low? We'll see where it lays out then. Okay, thank you, Alana. The Whale Festival?
Can I just go, I just want to go back for
Sure.
a sec. It did meet, we have to remember it did meet a lot of the criteria.
Yeah.
So,
We're quite conservative so far, so let's
Yep.
see where things lay out. Okay.
Mhm.
Whale Festival? Yes.
We seem to be coming to a soft consensus that we're supporting, or we're preferring to support newer initiatives. And if that's the case, Whale Fest is anything but a new initiative. So maybe we should support it to a lesser extent. It's 1,000.
Yeah, I actually had it down for that amount, but differ about the consensus. I certainly have the view that we should be supporting existing festivals as part of the strategy of development. So I don't know where the rest of council stand on that, but.
Councillor McMaster?
Yeah, I mean, I feel we have to support it to some extent. It's kind of a traditional festival, but I hate to say this, but I think, because I'm not going to do anything with it, but I think they need to, it needs to get revamped a little bit. So I'd support 1,000, but I'd really like to see them do something different. It's the same stuff, but it seems like the same stuff to me.
Thank you. So let's have 1,000, please. Queen of the Peak.
Lantern Public Market, Queen of the Peak was the last, wasn't it?
Queen of the
Oh,
Peak
there
is,
it
we're
is.
just
Okay,
working
sorry.
down the
Yeah,
list.
yeah, different list,
Yeah.
okay.
Councillor Fick?
Yeah, I think it's I wouldn't support the full amount, but I do think that it's a pretty, you know, it's the only, I think it's the only women's surf contest outside of a professional contest in the world. Is that true? That's what I've heard the organizers say, but
It certainly is in Canada.
It certainly is in Canada, and it may be the US as well, so I definitely support it. It's selling out, you know, really, like apparently last year if you didn't get your thing in 3 days, you didn't have a spot, so it's becoming more successful, but I really like the fact that it's in the first week of October, and it's women, and it's not about so much as money, and it's a whole week, so I really think it deserves our support as the surf capital of Canada. I just don't know where it's all going to play out, but I'd say, you know, half the amount that's being requested, because it's in the, it's at the 4.2 category as far as criteria too. So I don't know where it lands out at 3,500, but I think they do a lot for the residents of the community too, and they bring in a lot of people too. So.
Councillor Bryan?
Yeah, I have them at 4,000, because there were so many applicants and there was such an subscription, that, you know, it had to have some level of adjustment and downward, so I put it at 4, but it's only about 30% of the budget, and it is a fairly new event, and they are planning on adding an extra day, which really is a very significant kind of add-on. We don't know how that'll work out, but if we're not hitting that 20,000, I would be even looking to increase for them.
I had them down at 5. It's been a successful event. I think it's getting bigger. I think it's almost at the stage where if he asks for the same amount next year, I would be backing off, because I think it has proved successful. But I would like to continue supporting it as much as we can, like we did with Carving on the Edge for the first few years. And I suppose lastly, I'm always in support of bringing more young women into town. So.
Okay. Councillor Blanchett?
Funny.
Somebody's got to be.
Can I just skip that one?
I was quite impressed with some of the ideas they had for growing the festival. So I agree with 4,000, if more, and more if we can do it.
Okay, let's start with 4,000. I don't see any major disagreement. Thank you. The Lantern Festival and the Public Market are the last. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 3 more. So let's do the Lantern Festival and the Public Market, and then we'll move down to the French.
I'm full support for Lantern Festival.
Anyone else?
I think it's an iconic Tofino event, so definitely support it. They say it's a fundraiser, and they say they generally raise about $2,000. So if we donate $1,000 to the festival, we are essentially donating $1,000 to the fundraising recipient.
Which is the rest.
Yeah. Seeing as how they weren't in the council grant or in the council grants this year, that might not be a bad thing.
They chose not to participate in the council grants.
Yes.
Well, I had them down at 500. Again, it's iconic. It's been running for years and years, and I tend to think it should be a bit more self-supporting.
Okay. 500. Anybody feel very strongly it should be different?
I'd like to stay with 1,000 until we
at
see how it plays out.
Okay, so 1,000 then. And the Public Market is $2,500 request.
We've got 200 left.
I'd encourage you not to think about it like we have 200 left. Let's talk about what you think it should be at, and then we'll go through the list. Yes?
I attended the Public Market a couple of times last year, and I think just the fact that it runs for so long, I think that it should be supported at 2,500 in full. I think it's quite a small request considering how well it's participated in by visitors here and locals as well. And I get a sense that it's really appreciated by people that come here. Yeah.
Councillor Thick?
Well, I think a little bit differently on that. We have a low score, 3.0, but you know, when we're missing complete financials, that's somewhat of a worry to me. And there is capacity there, I believe. You know, the cost of the tables is pretty low, and I understand that the money that is given from the district goes towards the entertainment. I mean, I just think that these lower criteria scores, I can't support to the full amount. If that is important to us, we're sending a mixed message to the proponents, are we not? We're saying, oh, you've got 3.0, you're missing your financials, oh, but we're going to give you full support. I don't agree.
Just a couple comments there. First of all, these are staff scored applications, and as April made clear at the beginning, we may or may not agree entirely with how they've been scored or put through a first filter. So that being said, missing complete financials, we can make it conditional grant. And that, to be consistent, we are also funding other things that, at this point, we're considering funding things that are missing parts of the grant application as well. So let's be consistent, I would offer.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the overall score.
Yeah, Councillor Bart?
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, it's probably the one event or series of events that reports the highest number of visitors, 12,000, something like that. It creates life and vitality, a kind of street dynamic that draws people into the downtown core, which is really an asset to you know, the business community surrounding, particularly directly surrounding, but also just to kind of give that flavor of this is a place of that you can enjoy yourself. You come and sit in the grass and listen to the music and so forth. So I'd like to see it supported because I think it adds to a quality of environment, a festive environment for the community.
I would support it as well, to at least 1,000, 1,500. I think most small towns, this is the thing that they're really big on, and they're great. That's why when you go someplace else, you go to these little market things, and yeah. So 1,000, 1,500.
And the rest in 25?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Master?
I was inclined to 1,500. I wasn't happy that the money was going to entertainment, and I'm not happy that they charged such a. I think after so many years they should be charging more for a table, and so that's why they need to get the finances in order. You know, $10 these days is ridiculous. So I think maybe they need to be told, well, you know, you're only getting this much, so you know, maybe you ought to put your fees up a little bit. Plus, they say they're using local entertainment, but it wasn't all local, all local. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd say 1,500.
1,500? All right, let's do that. Thank you. And then the last one, the French, un hommage à Clémence Desrochers.
This one I didn't see.
It's said 0.
Okay. Anyone else over here? Okay, so 0. Thanks, Savannah. All right, so with this first look, we're at 21,300. One of the festivals that was discussed that could be lowered was the Lantern Festival. There was also a little bit of room, I think, in the Queen of the Peak. And
Carving on the edge.
Carving on the Edge.
Carving on the edge.
Thank you. Does anyone have oh, sorry, April?
I just wanted to add, there was a question earlier about the amount received through the arts grant for the Tla-o-qui-aht Heritage.
The Cultural Heritage Festival?
Cultural
Yeah.
Heritage Festival?
Yeah.
They did not receive.
Oh, thank you for checking that. Okay. Okay, what are council's wishes? Yes, Councillor Bart.
Yeah, I'd reduce Carving on the Edge to 2,500. The Food and Wine Festival to 1,000. And maybe the public market to 1,200. I think, does that take care of that?
That does take care of that. How does council, anybody disagree with that? So, Ivana, if you could change the public market to 1,200. Thank you. The Food and Wine Festival, was that the one? 2,000?
Food and Wine Festival to 1,000.
Yeah, and Carving on the Edge to 2,500. Yeah, okay.
And
yes.
Is that 3,000 that we've got for the cultural heritage?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Okay, so this look has the Shorebird Festival fully funded, the Cultural Heritage Festival funded at 3,000. Their request was 4. Carving on the Edge at 2,500 instead of 5. The Oyster Festival at 1,500 instead of 2,500. The Feast/Odolith at 1,000 instead of 4,000. Pacific Rim Whale Festival at half their request at 1,000. Queen of the Peak at 4,000 out of 7. Food and Wine Festival at 1,000 from 2,500. Tofino Lantern Festival, fully funded at 1,000. Public Market, just under half at 1,200. The Breweller Kids Classic, a little less than half at 2,000. And the Saltwater Classic, the Wellness Festival, and the French one at 0. Any comments? Yes, Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, I would support when it's laid out contingent on them completing the missing information.
Okay, just a question to staff. Would it be helpful if the motion required that the missing information be submitted by a certain date?
Yes.
Okay, thought so. And does 2 weeks seem reasonable? Or, okay, so can we say May 15th? Is that a, let's make it the Friday before the long weekend.
Can we make that request for missing information or that contingency applicable to all grants with missing information, not just?
It's for the ones that, it would be then for Rail Festival, Queen of the Peak,
Okay.
Public Market, yeah, it's for all of the ones that
Yep.
have missing information. Exactly. So yeah, I'd suggest Friday, May 15th. Would that be, that's okay with staff?
I
Okay.
wouldn't be optimistic about the public market getting that together in 2 weeks. I mean,
Well, I think Councillor Blanchette's made a worthwhile statement, which is that there's a standard and that the criteria are clearly set out, and these are them, and we're giving you another 2 weeks now to submit the information that you didn't submit, and it'll happen or it won't. Okay, so unless there's any objections, I think I'd look for a motion to make the RMI event support grants as listed with this condition that missing information be provided by May 15th.
move.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Councillor Thurgood. Any final discussion on this? Councillor Anderson?
I just would like to say, I didn't support the Prism Garden Wellness Festival because of their ranking and missing information, but I think there is, I would have some support for something of that nature. I know that it's health, wellness, that sort of thing. It does draw a lot of people to our area, and I think it's something that could be developed. I don't know if a festival is the best way, but there's I do have some support for that.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right, any final comment? I'll call the question then. Oh, Councillor Blanchette?
I just wanted to echo what Councillor Anderson said. It's a real sector out here that is not celebrated. It's kind of like food was 15, 20 years ago. It was bubbling, and it's kind of like education is now. It's bubbling. It's not. There's not a sort of a focus on it. So I agree with Councillor Anderson that would be a good thing to encourage.
Thank you. All right, I'll call a question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. Yes, for anyone who, well, I guess a few of you were at the presentations that the students from Simon Fraser and the University of Austria made, and they had one presentation specifically on promoting wellness in Tofino. So I think you might have left by then. It was compelling. Okay, so the next item on our agenda, yes,
Sorry,
Bert?
just in a follow-up to the grants, you know, we do have the, we've adopted the report for the event strategy, and I'm wondering if council's going to kind of see an action plan as a report from staff, just so, because when I look at some of this, you know, a question comes to mind: will some of staff's time be devoted to one forming this events advisory body? Will they be kind of looking at ways to empower, strengthen the ability of, say, things, events or festivals like a wellness festival getting underway, or, you know, like what will be the work plan? Is that coming back to us? That's my question.
Does staff want to answer that right now, or would you prefer to think about that and come back to council later? I'll look at you.
I think we'll come back to council with something, but I think a lot of that will be discussed by the event working group.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that,
Thank you for
then
flagging it.
yeah, but even that there's an event working group
Yeah.
that's going to
Yeah.
get underway is the kind of thing that, you know, would be good
Yes.
to know.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Dick?
And just one thing for staff, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but the CBT did offer a grant writing workshop in February this year, both in Tofino and Tla-o-qui-aht. So just so you, to Councillor Blanchette's point, that such exists. And it would be really good if we could tie in the applicants perhaps for this process with the applicants for the call for projects, and that's a win-win for the communities.
Thank you.
Just to, so we could actually advertise that.
There's a lot of different grants going on, you're right. Yeah. Okay. We will move on then. So, we have a special event permit application from Aeriosa for dancing in the trees and on the tombolo between Middle Chesterman and Frank Island, May 8th to 15th. Just one small change I wanted council to know is that for 2 of the days, May 13th and 14th, they're just adjusting the time of the rehearsal slightly to 2 to 5 p.m. and the performance to 5:30 to 6:30. So it's a small change in what's written in the staff report, but it doesn't affect the way the recommendation from staff is worded, so it won't affect motion making. Councillor Dick?
Move the recommendation for 11.7.
Thank you. Second? All right, so moved by Councillor Dick, seconded by Councillor Thurgood, the recommendation for the authorization of the special event permit. Any questions or discussion on this? Councillor Blanchette?
I just wanted to note that these guys are real pros. I know the proponent, the one who writes the grants, and just looking at this application, so these people know what they're doing. So it's a pleasure to read something like that.
Thank you. Councillor Dick?
I just wondered how they're being paid for this, or are they being paid? Or does that concern us?
I don't know the answer. Okay. Councillor Blanchette?
I believe further to my earlier remarks, they have other grants on the go.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad we're the beneficiaries.
Yeah, we sure are. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Our next special event permit application is for an electrical vehicle awareness day on May 8th. And permission is being sought to use the paved parking lot behind the municipal hall here from 10 to 12 on Friday, May 8th.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
I would like to move that.
Move the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Bart. Any questions? Councillor Blanchette?
Just wondering what happens to all the RVs that are parked in that lot on that day.
I'm sure staff will figure out a way to have them moved to, or not park there that day or something. And I don't think it's occupying the entire
traffic
thing, but
for
traffic cones the day before.
Yeah.
Don't doubt it won't get worked out. Okay, any other questions? All right, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. And a special event permit application for the Tofino Public Market. This is the same application that we see most years, the regular event. Thank you. Councillor McMaster moves the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Blanchette. Any questions? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And a special event permit application for the Surf's Up for Autism event on September 12th to 13th.
Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McMaster.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Thick. Any questions, discussion? Call, yes.
Did
Councillor
I read
Blanchette.
this is the 3rd year they're doing this?
Yes.
Okay, so the bugs have been worked out then, in terms of...
Yeah, it's a very well-run event.
You know,
Councillor Thick?
Yeah, I just, last year though, was it really advertised in the community? It's such an amazing event. And I've heard ripples like in Victoria and other places, wow, you guys run this thing. It's like, wow, can we make sure that people in our towns are made well aware of it too? And
I can certainly pass that on to the
it'd
event
certainly be a
organizer.
great thing to, not just support, but actually to, roster some volunteers for.
I agree. Thank you for that. Shall be done. Any final discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, the audit committee met yesterday, and we recommend that the 2014 financial statements be approved. So first of all, let's just have a motion that the minutes of the audit committee meeting be received, please. Thank you, Councillor Blanchette. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any discussion on the minutes? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried. And the recommendation that the 2014 financial statements be approved.
Move.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor McMaster, seconded by Councilor Bart. Any questions, discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. And the Tofino Recreation Commission minutes from the meeting held April 15th.
Move to receive.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Seconded by Councilor Thick. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Blanchett.
There's something in the minutes about the donation of the barbecue and trailer to a local nonprofit organization. I heard through the rumor mill that they're not using the barbecue anymore because it's not food safe. And I just wonder if there's any liabilities if we donate a non-food safe item to somebody else and something happens.
Councilor.
For lack of
April.
another staff member, I'll jump in. I don't think it's that the barbecue itself isn't food safe, it's that the requirements to operate it in a food safe manner are very challenging. You need to have a triple sink and all sorts of sanitation, and I think they've just found that it's become very difficult to have a licensed food safe event.
Councilor Thick?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit surprised here that we have these minutes, but we had this big presentation, you know, a month or so ago, and what happened? Did the indoor rec facility fall off the charts or something? I guess I'm just surprised that there's no mention, there's no inquiry about how we could create a fund, there's no fundraising. I find it like, I'm just very surprised.
I think that might be because the ball is a little bit in our court and they've been discussing on a staff level about the feasibility study. So at this point, maybe the rec commission doesn't have anything to discuss in their meetings. Their meetings aren't overly long, and they're probably waiting to hear more from District of Tofino staff about next steps, and then they can really get fired up. But I'm not surprised, but thank you for saying so. Anyone
have the same question?
Any comment from staff? No? Okay. Okay. All right. So, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Minutes received. All right, we have one item of new business. This is the council computer policy, and it's a notice of motion that's been provided by Councillor Thick. So Councillor Thick moves that staff prepare a computer policy for council members that provides for the use of district-owned equipment or equipment provided by council members with reasonable compensation, but without technical support from the district. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, Councillor Bart, seconds.
Point of order. My understanding is that a notice of motion means that the motion itself will come up at the next meeting.
No, this is a notice of motion that was provided before the meeting, and so it lands on this agenda.
Oh, okay.
So it has been moved and seconded. Councillor Thick, would you like to lead off the discussion?
Yeah, I think it was last year, October, that we repealed the lost computer policy. That's correct. Am I correct in saying that? Last October. So we, as councillors, are left without any policy. Right now, we have, some of us are using a newly given computers called Surface. Some of us are using old computers that we had from the last council. And I just think it would be incumbent upon the council to direct staff as to how we wish to proceed with this, because previously we had discussion before the computers came, and this time we didn't have that opportunity. So I just think that whether we choose to use our own device or one that was given, we just need to be clear about that, because if something happens to a device that any one of us might have, what can we do about it? Then it's at our own expense. So I think that if we are entrusted with this information and communication, I think that we should have either a computer or a laptop or an iPad that is something that is given to us, or we are enabled to have this information and transmit information and to store information. We need that ability. We don't have paper. So one of the things I've been thinking about is could there be a one-time stipend, for example, that is given to councillors upon appointment that would either enable them to purchase a piece of equipment of their own choosing, or I guess that's, or perhaps it would, as was the case in the last council, one councillor or two councillors preferred to have a laptop. So I would like to see something more in the line of a stipend that is given to councillors that would cover that off for the term that they were then appointed for. So, for example, there could, I know in other organizations there would be a stipend, I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe $750 or $1,000 for the purposes of your computer, for the purposes of the council meeting minutes and transmission of emails. So that's my opening comment about that. And I guess, yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
So just so that I understand correctly, what you're suggesting is that rather than as in the past when staff selected and purchased the tablet and then distributed to council, that the point is that the amount, that value, instead be given as a stipend to each individual who wished to use it towards the purchase of their own equipment without technical support from the district staff. Okay. Correct. Thank you. Councillor McMaster?
I agree. I think you could, word it into the extent that, councillors are expected to have a computer of some sort, and because we are on paperless, and that can be of their choice, and a certain stipend will go towards it. So if somebody wanted to take the $500, $750 and buy a $10,000 computer, they could, or if they just want to buy a tablet. But to be fair, I don't think it worked the last time around, just getting the, what are they called, Surface. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I think that's the point of Councillor Fick's notice of motion, is trying to adopt a policy that works for council.
I think the other thing is some people already have computers, and that money can go to paying their internet fees or all the paper we use to print off various parts of the agenda or things like that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Blanchett.
My concern is with IT support, and that if every councillor has a different computer, it may become unwieldy. I mean, we're not power users by any means. All we use is PDFs and Microsoft Word, basically, and those are pretty interchangeable across every platform. But every place I've ever worked, you walk in the door and they say, "Here's your desk and here's your computer," and it's not a point of discussion. You just work on that computer. So I would, if I were responsible for IT, I'd be wary of a sort of a carte blanche approach.
I think that this motion is quite clear in that it states it provides either for the use of district-owned equipment, which would come with IT support, or at a councillor's choice, they could choose to receive a financial stipend towards their own item, but they would not receive IT support. So that puts the onus on the councillor to decide what's the best option for them. And that this motion, if passed, directs staff to provide a policy that creates that flexibility. So I think your concern will be accounted for by the decision that an individual makes themselves.
Yes, but then the question is, where do they get their IT support? Because council shuts down if one councillor cannot open the documents or read the documents. So do they run off to Tofino Tech, or what happens at that point?
It would be their responsibility, would be my interpretation.
Well, I'd like to hear from staff about this.
Sure, I'll just finish with council first, and then Councillor Anderson.
Well, the reason we did repeal the last one was to have, I'm guilty of not using what was provided, but the staff was having a hard time, and councillors were having a hard time with the iPad. In some cases wasn't compatible with what was in the office, and that was the point of it. So we're moving away from that, but I'm just wondering how this would play out if you did get a stipend for, and provided your own computer, found you didn't like that, then can you go back to using district-owned equipment? So would, in a sense, and then what would you do with that stipend? Would you return the stipend and keep that equipment and then ask that the district provide you with one? So where does it leave you if you do go on your own, you're not satisfied with that? So, or, I mean, in a sense, we've gone the other way and some are not satisfied with that. So that could work the other way too.
Certainly, thank you.
It's, yeah.
That could be a consideration of the policy, that there's an option to
Yeah.
return the money and to use a piece of district-owned equipment. Councillor Thurgood?
Yeah, I like most of the council members don't use my Surface. I can get on the internet with it. Haven't been able to work out the emails yet. And there's no support offered by district.
For the Surface, there is.
So I've got to come in and see Aaron.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Burke?
Yeah, I turned my Surface back in because it kept shutting down. Automatically, and we had received a notice from the CAO that we could expect that it had a fairly short life, but in my case, the life was like almost as short as pressing the button to turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last I heard of it. I never got anything back, and I thought that we were going to get some kind of information on how we could work with it, because I know Councillor Blanchette spent a lot of his time getting up to speed on using it and so forth, and just that didn't feel appropriate. That it was, if we're going to get a new system, then we get a lot of support with it and we make sure the system works. The piece that I had the hardest problem with about where we got to with computer policy is the idea that we work with this device for 4 years and then we turn it back into the district. So the end of our council term, you know, we haven't been using necessarily anything else because of all the correspondence and so on and so forth, and then you don't have that device anymore, even if it's cleaned of all the files. And I just find that kind of a bit odd. So at the end of the council term, I have to go out and buy a new computer because I don't have something that I've been working with for 4 years. That's the piece I just really didn't like at all.
I think part of the perhaps misunderstanding is that the device, and I'm going to call it a device, not a computer, it's a device designed to replace a paper minute package. And so it's a device that, yes, the email should also work and function, but it was never intended, I don't think, in the history of the District of Tofino to be as functional as a computer per se. So I think we're talking, I don't really think it's wise to get into a discussion about the specific piece of technology. We're trying to provide, if we pass this motion, some direction to staff to get them to come back and create a policy which we would then look at and see if it addresses. And what we're trying to do here is make for easier decision making into the future. So I accept that there are specific points of what's happened in the past that didn't go so well. The Surface, maybe it wasn't the best choice. But the point is, how do we set a policy that's going to make this easier for councils of the future and provide some flexibility as well as accommodating some of the differences between councillors' preferences and the way the district staff can and cannot provide IT support for a diversity of different devices.
And just as a clarification, when we go back to when we first got the iPads and we were debating that, I did say in the debate that if anyone did not have a computer, they should get a laptop rather than an iPad, because an iPad's just basically a receiver of information. So.
And the council before did do that, and the decision, I think, might have been something around reducing the costs, and that a tablet was a far cheaper option than a laptop, but I wasn't involved in those discussions. So again, this is sort of high-level policy making direction to staff that we're giving a good idea to staff about what the concerns are of council so that they can do the best job capturing those concerns, and then I'll ask for any staff questions in a minute.
Maybe in the policy it should say, you know, staff will support this sort of device, and if you want to go on your own, to, you know, you are on your own sort of.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it would do, yeah. Councillor Blanchette?
I think we need to make very clear the ownership of these devices. My understanding is that last council, the iPad was theirs basically. After council term was over, they kept it. Whereas this, it's the opposite. After term is over, it goes back to the district. And so whatever policy we have should make that clear. And that sort of settles the, I mean, if it's the district's piece of equipment, then the only thing it has to do is what the district requires it to do, display minutes and check email and internet access, I think would be the three basics. If it's our piece of equipment, then yes, we can load Photoshop on it and do whatever we want with it. But we need to make that clear in the policy.
So we request that kind of clarity, thank you. Okay. Any staff comment?
Two comments. One, I think we've indicated before, it's for ease of administration, it's easy to, if, you know, it's all or nothing for staff. With respect that some councils may, you know, be happy to accept a device and use it for 4 years and turn it over, and others may want to have something that's more robust and have the council stipend reflect that. My second comment is with respect to stipend. Council currently receives a stipend through the remuneration bylaw. Sorry. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Council receives a stipend through the remuneration bylaw, and 1/3 of council's remuneration is for expenses, you know, which includes paper and so on. If we're going to be giving more, I'll use the term cash to council, we would have to do it through amending that bylaw, not just through a policy.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll let you sort out the details.
We can, it's a detail, and I just don't want council to be surprised that.
Thank you. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Councillor Burt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is fine to say that this is for the receiving of minutes and so forth, but we do have committees. We sit on committees, we do research and so forth, and I think we work with our devices a lot, and at the end, even if it's to buy it out, if one chooses to keep it, I think there has to be that choice. I dropped my iPad on a cement surface, broke the glass. I just went and spent $250 to replace it. If my term was coming up, you know, I feel kind of like, really? Why would I, you know, why should I spend $250 on that, you know? I'll go, yeah, I'll go buy my own or something, you know, and here's your computer back, or your iPad back.
Sure, I think what I would do is I just ask staff to take when considering the ownership question, to take into account the length of the term, the age and condition of the technology, and what the district would do with it if it was returned to the district at the end of the, and we don't have to talk about it any further. I'm sure you guys can work out the details. But, okay, so is there any other discussion of points that have not yet been raised? Okay, I will call the question then. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? None, thank you. It is carried. Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our business for the open part of the meeting, and a question period. Are there any questions from the audience? Mr. Bailey, any questions? Okay. Yes, Mao.
A question regarding agenda point 11.3, the Neighbourhood Traffic Committee recap, Chestnut Beach. I have a question for Councillor Barrett. You stated that you find it quite reasonable for surfers to park on the South Chestnuts parking lot and walk 10 to 15 minutes to Middle and North Chestnut Beach where the surf break is. Does this mean that you would also find it reasonable that permit parking and people who, for example, go on a kayak adventure tour, park their vehicle a 10 to 15 minute walk outside the downtown core instead of using Main Street as an all-day parking lot?
Well, that's kind of my point. The working group committee received a report that that highlighted zones of what's a reasonable reasonable distance to walk. And I think as far as Centennial Park was like 5 minutes or something like that. I don't know that 15 minutes per se is the right amount. My question was, what is the right amount of time for it to be reasonable? And you know, because those kind of concurrent, those identified distances representing how many minutes to get to a certain point. We have that for looking at the downtown. We don't have that information for looking at the parking lot zones and how long it takes to get to a particular place. I was just commenting that I thought that might be worthwhile information to have, because I think it would inform people about the choice. You know, really, it's only going to take you a few minutes to walk. So it doesn't. So parking on the road, you know, it's not onerous to go to the parking lot, really, when you have the actual information that this is how long it takes to walk. That's, I was kind of trying to achieve getting more clarification on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was just because last night we received the parking plan report, and we still see for Main Street it is being dedicated as parking lot for going on tours and whatnot. So
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, can I have somebody read the motion to go in camera, please, and then we'll do the recess.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
That the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91A, C and E of the Community Charter to discuss matters relating to personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee or agent. 2, employee relations. 3, the acquisition, disposition or expropriation of land or improvements.
Thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councilman Thurgood. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried.